Judge Tammy's gavel commanded.
I sentence you all to serve time in prison for robbing the bank. Landon, you also have been charged with public indecency and urinating in a courtroom. You will serve 6 months in addition to your bank robbery sentence. And Carson, due to the damage you caused with your fart, you will serve an extra year in prison.
The 4 of them were then escorted to prison by the guards. Maggie, on the other hand, was set free and left the courthouse with a sense of relief after making a compelling case as to somehow not being involved. As the group entered the prison, they were greeted by a strange sight. The cell guard, Gary, was making grunting noises and pointing to various cells. Nobody could understand him, and they soon realized that this was going to be a unique experience. The group heads towards the cafeteria. The line in the cafeteria was long and slow-moving, and the food looked unappetizing at best. The workers behind the cold metal counter seemed to take pleasure in serving the inmates their meals, calling out things like,
"Here's your slop, darlin',"
and
"Enjoy your gourmet cuisine."
The group shuffled through the line, trying not to make eye contact with anyone else. They were all feeling out of place, like they didn't belong there. Finally, they reached the front of the line and received their meals. They found a table in the corner of the room and sat down, trying to ignore the stares of the other inmates. The cafeteria was loud and chaotic, with people shouting and arguing over their food. It was like a microcosm of the entire prison, with everyone jostling for space and trying to establish some sort of hierarchy. Landon wrinkled his nose in disgust as he looked at his tray.
Why do we have to eat this slop?
He whined, poking at his food with a plastic fork. He could see Maggie in his head shaking her head, rolling her eyes, and saying,
"It's because it's a prison, Landon. What did you expect?"
As the group continued their conversation, they all exchanged a glance with Gary, the strange prison guard who never seemed to speak. His eyes were fixed on them, making the group feel uneasy. Carson leaned in towards the group.
"Do you think he's trying to communicate with us?"
he asked, trying to stifle a laugh. The group tries their best to understand what Gary is saying, but it's almost impossible to decipher. They often find themselves nodding and smiling, pretending to understand what he's trying to communicate. Gary is trying to explain a new prison rule to the group, but they can't seem to grasp the concept. As he speaks, Carson starts to feel the familiar rumble of a nearby prisoner's fart. He can't help but smirk at the situation, causing Landon to give him a confused look and say, "Huh?" Carson and Kennedy try to contain their laughter, but it's too late. The noise and smell of the fart fill the room, causing Gary to scrunch up his face in disgust. He looks at the group, unaware of what just happened, and says something that sounds like gibberish to everyone else. As they ate their slop and tried to acclimate to their new surroundings, the group couldn't help but feel like they were in over their heads. They had no idea what lay ahead for them in this place, but they knew that they needed to stay strong and stick together if they had any hope of surviving. As some short time passes, the group becomes more accustomed to life in prison. They learn the ins and outs of the daily routine, from chow time in the cafeteria to work assignments in the courtyard. They make connections with other inmates and try to stay out of trouble with the guards. The sun beat down on the dusty courtyard on a stale day, casting long shadows across the dry ground. The group entered the courtyard but decided to split up. Kennedy and Patrick decided to go to one end of the yard to catch a break from the chaos of the new situation. Suddenly, from across the courtyard, the door to the guard post swung open, and Ava stepped out, her sharp eyes scanning the yard. Kennedy and Patrick tried to keep their faces neutral, but they couldn't help feeling a flicker of hope as Ava cautiously approached them.
"Listen up, you two,"
she said, her voice low and urgent.
"I've got a proposition for you. I need something from the warden's desk, something that will make me look good in front of the other guards. And in return, I can grant you your freedom.
Kennedy and Patrick exchanged a wary glance, unsure of whether to trust Ava. But the promise of freedom was too great to ignore.
What do you need us to get?
Kennedy asked, her voice shaking slightly.
A small trinket, nothing important.
Ava replied, her eyes gleaming with anticipation.
It's a golden paperweight, in the shape of a lion. The warden keeps it on his desk, and he's very proud of it.
Kennedy and Patrick nodded, their minds racing with possibilities. If they could retrieve the paperweight, they could use it as leverage to bargain for their freedom. But they needed to make sure their team was also included in the deal.
We'll do it, but we've got a few others with us as well.
Patrick said, his voice firm.
And how do we get past the other guards?
He added. Ava smiled, a wicked glint in her eye.
Leave that to me,
she said.
I'll create a diversion, and you two can slip in and grab the paperweight. But remember, if you get caught, I never gave you permission to do this. You're on your own.
With that, Ava disappeared back into the guard post, leaving Kennedy and Patrick to fill the rest of the group in on the news. When Kennedy and Patrick walked towards one end of the yard to unexpectedly meet Ava, Landon and Carson took to the other. They noticed a commotion up ahead. A group of prisoners was gathered around a woman with a commanding presence. Carson nudged Landon.
Oh, it's that Mia we heard of in the chow slop room. Ya know, the ringleader.
Mia approached them, sizing them up with a menacing look. Carson, feeling confident, decided to break the ice with a joke.
Hey Mia, did you hear about the guy who stole a calendar? He got 12 months.
Mia exited the crowd she was in, confused at the fact that someone was cracking mid-level jokes in prison, let out a laugh.
That's a good one, Carson. I haven't heard that before. Wow! Or anything like that in a prison for that matter.
Landon just looked confused.
Huh?
Carson continued.
And why did the prisoner take a ladder to jail? Because he wanted to go over the wall.
Mia chuckled again. Landon developed a slumped posture and stale expression.
Huh? I don't get it.
Mia, annoyed, sighed and turned to Landon.
He means that the prisoner wanted to escape by climbing over the wall using the ladder.
Landon's face turned red, keeping its awkward flatness.
Oh!
As they continued to chat, a small crowd of inmates began to gather around them, intrigued by the interaction. Carson saw this as an opportunity to showcase his comedic skills and decided to tell more jokes.
Did you hear about the guy who got hit in the head with a can of soda? He was lucky it was a soft drink.
Mia chuckled.
Ahaha, that's really clever.
But once again Landon just stared blankly.
Huh?
What's wrong with this guy?
Mia exclaimed. Some members of the crowd placing their heads in their hands. Carson tried one last time, hoping Landon didn't continue looking like he just dropped a log during a geometry quiz.
Why did the burglar break into the bakery? He needed the dough.
Mia laughed out loud.
Ahaha, that's hilarious.
But again, Landon remained absolutely clueless.
Huh?
The crowd began to grow larger, and people were now openly grunting at Landon's lack of humor. Some were even mocking him.
What, you don't understand basic jokes, man?
Mia, growing increasingly impatient and absolutely confused that she's explaining a joke to another prisoner, explained.
Landon, you idiot, it's a play on words. Need sounds like need, and burglars break into places they need to get into.
Landon scratched his head.
Oh, not funny.
More people started to gather around, drawn by the spectacle of the awkward exchange. Mia, dumbfounded that someone would be this stupid to miss a mid-level joke from jokes.com, threw her hands up in frustration.
That's it. I'm done. You guys can just sit in this awkward pit for all I care.
The crowd dispersed, shaking their heads at Landon's lack of humor. Landon and Carson were left alone in silence, with Landon feeling embarrassed and Carson feeling disappointed. It was going to be a long sentence. Well, it seems like our group of comic catastrophes doesn't yet have a clutch on their cage. Landon may not be the sharpest tool in the shed, but we couldn't help but chuckle at his cluelessness. And Carson, well, he had us in stitches with his comedic timing in a literal prison. Mia, on the other hand, had us sympathizing with her frustration at the boys' lack of humor comprehension. Meanwhile, Kennedy and Patrick's task had us on the edge of our seats, wondering how they would break the news to Landon and Carson. Do the two jokesters find a way to mend their relationship with the prison's most fierce? And do Ken and Pat run into any difficulties telling the others about Ava's proposal? It's always a wild ride. We'll see what happens next on The Calamity Chronicles.